What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here, and both Republicans and Democrats and a lot of people are growing really concerned about the debt ceiling and the United States government and Social Security, Medicare, and anybody that gets money or benefits from the government going default. Because if this happens, and this could happen as early as June, which is only about a month away, it's a significant problem. And this is also a significant problem for the stock market. Anybody that has 401ks, pensions, or the US dollar, as you can see here, pretty much everything is interconnected with this. And the other problem here is that President Biden has pretty much refused to meet with Kevin McCarthy for about 3 months now. It's almost 90 days at this point or something like that since they initially met and just had their initial meeting. And we don't know what's going on. The Republicans have now rolled out their initial bill, which has $4.5 trillion in cuts to the budget over the course of 10 years, which a lot of people aren't happy about because when you start cutting things, it's, well, really not, nobody likes cutting things. There's actually cuts to the military there. It goes back to the 2022 budget. And when we look at going into next year, 2024, it's actually a pretty significant cut because you look at 8.7% raise to Social Security, which we had just in 1 year. And think about how high inflation is right now, and think about the world's potential threat of war. There is an actual war going on right now in Europe, of course, Ukraine and Putin and Russia, and the threat of it being larger here. Also, the threat of China invading Taiwan. A lot of people saying now's not really the time to cut spending to our military. In fact, we should probably be beefing up our military. But alas, the problem is that we have $31 trillion plus of debt. We're spending $1 trillion a year in interest. Where do the cuts come from? So he has proposed cuts to our military budget, cuts to SNAP benefits, cuts to needy families, the TANF program, Temporary Assistance to Needy Family, cuts to a lot of things. And Democrats, besides being really ticked off about the entire budget, have said nothing in response. There's been no negotiations, and we haven't gotten any response out of Biden besides, we hate your plan. And it's been 90 days, almost 3 months since this. And remember, for Republicans and Democrats to come up with a solution, they have to have a negotiation and an agreement. And it's basically like two stratospheres between the two. They're nowhere close to this. Well, here's what House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has to say, and will give us more information on this. Take a listen here.
Right now, the national debt is at $31.7 trillion, with interest alone on that debt of more than $500 billion. Under this proposal from House Republicans, the national debt ceiling would be raised by $1.5 trillion, while spending levels would be rolled back to 2022 levels. The bill would also impose a 1% cap on future spending, claw back unused COVID-19 money, cancel IRS funding for new staff, and repeal green tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act. President Biden did not have a serious response to the plan. Instead, he attacked what he called MAGA Republicans, saying that any spending cuts attached to the increase in the debt ceiling is a non-starter.
Folks, here's what's really dangerous. MAGA Republicans in Congress are threatening to default on the national debt. The debt that took 230 years to accumulate overall, unless we do what they say. They say they're going to default unless I agree to all these wacko notions they have. Default would be worse than totally irresponsible.
Joining me right now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the House Speaker, California Congressman Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Speaker, it's great to have you this morning. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me back on the show, Maria.
Well, you heard the president. He called you MAGA Republican extremism. He said these ideas are wacko. Did you threaten to allow the nation to default?
No, we're the only ones in Washington that are actually putting a responsible plan out that will raise the debt limit. Think about, for more than 80 days it's been since I sat down with the president on February 1st to negotiate, to work through this, and he's ignored it. But I'm beginning to wonder about his thoughts. Think about what he's saying. When we say limit, save, and grow, when we limit the future spending of Congress, that's an idea by Senator Manchin to go at 1%. We're saying to save people's money to go back what we were spending just 4 months ago. What we're also saying is claw back that COVID money that was appropriated but sat there for 2 years and wasn't used. He actually signed the law that says the pandemic's over. Then when we talk about work requirements, Senator Biden voted for them. And just a couple weeks ago, when the Democrats had a very large victory in Wisconsin and they won the state Supreme Court, they passed work requirements on welfare by 82%. So does he consider his own party wacko and MAGA as well? I'm beginning to wonder about the words that he says and the thoughts that he's using, because the idea that he won't even negotiate for more than 80 days, he is now putting the country in default. We're the only ones being responsible and sensible about this.
Do you feel that you have the votes? Here's what Larry Lindsey writes from the Lindsey Group. Biden does have some unlikely allies. A handful of House Republicans are withholding support from the McCarthy plan. McCarthy has only a 5-seat majority, so you need almost every vote. Do you have the votes to pass this in the House this upcoming week?
Maria, we do have a very small majority, only 5 seats, one of the smallest we've ever had. But I cannot imagine someone in our conference that would want to go along with Biden's reckless spending. This is responsible. This is something that we have sat down for months, that everybody's had input in. It's not where everybody gets 100% of what they want. But when we send this to the Senate, we're showing that, yes, we're able to raise the debt ceiling into the next year. But what we're doing is we're being responsible fiscally and bringing our house back in order. It doesn't solve all of our problems, but it gets us on the right path. And this gets us to the negotiating table just as government and America expects us to do.
So do you feel that you can hold a vote this upcoming week? What are your plans?
We will hold a vote this week, and we will pass it, and we will send it to the Senate. And for more than 80 days, where the president has ignored us, called people names for things that he even voted for himself, makes no sense or logic to it. I think as president and the leader of the free world, this is one of the problems we have challenges around this country and around the world. He needs to show leadership and come to the negotiating table instead of put us in default. This is risky what he's doing. He's threatening the markets. Think of his ideas. In the next month, if you actually have good credit, you pay more.
Yeah.
If you have bad credit, you get a discount. Who believes in these type of ideas? This goes against everything what America was created upon, that if you work hard, you can succeed. And that's the difference. Come to the table, negotiate, and do what is right.
Yeah, you mentioned that housing proposal. Isn't that the way we got into the worst housing crisis that anyone has ever seen back in 2007?
Maria, mark my words, when we look to the future and there's a new housing crisis and there's a new default, it is his actions, but it goes to something much deeper. It's a socialist belief that you reward bad behavior. So what does it tell the American public? First of all, there's no consequences for crime anymore. Secondly, you know what? Don't pay your bills because you get rewarded. Third, don't pay back your student loans even though you signed the paper and you said you would do it because you wanted an education. Somebody else will pay that for you. It takes away the work ethic in America. And for the idea for the president to think that's a wacko idea, no, that's an idea that built this country and made us stronger.
Yeah, it's a great point. And to be fair, you have many Democrats actually encouraging the president to sit down with you and negotiate. The strongest criticism came from Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who said, while it is reasonable to sincerely disagree with any specific debt ceiling approach, we will achieve a historic default if President Biden continues to refuse even to negotiate. So you, just to be clear, you have not heard a response from this president based on after your plan.
No, we're the only one that has a plan out there. And you know what's interesting? It's only human nature. When you want to avoid somebody to talk about something, you're afraid. You're not just afraid, but you know you've done something wrong. This is a president that has ignored one of the greatest crises we have before us, our fiscal problem. Every nation, every great nation has collapsed when they've overextended themselves. In the next 10 years, we will now spend $10.5 trillion just on interest. From 1940 and today, we've only spent $9 trillion. That means 17.5% of everything the taxpayer goes in is just going to pay interest on the debt. He weakens us, makes us more dependent on China. His overspending, he wants to spend more money than we spent during COVID. He added $6 trillion. That's where inflation was created. So he's creating inflation, making us dependent upon China, and then he's jeopardizing Medicare and Social Security. Because for the first time in a 10-year window, not just a highway trust fund, but Medicare and Social Security becomes insolvent, so it automatically gets cut. This rests upon his feet, not because he made a bad decision. The real decision is he's afraid to even negotiate.
Yeah.
I can't believe that the leader of the free world, and to choose the words, it makes me begin to wonder about what his thoughts are.
What do you mean?
I mean, who would go out and think an idea is wacko? It's something that he actually supported. Or Manchin says limit government of 1% growth. Every household, a debt ceiling is like giving your child a credit card and you hit the limit. Would you automatically just raise the limit, or would you first look at how they spent their money? We're raising the limit responsibly, but we're looking at our fiscal house and curving the waste, limiting the growth in the future, saving us taxpayer money, but also growing the economy by making us energy independent and getting us cutting red tape so we can build things in America. We could build those roads.
But how realistic is it to have a 1% cap for the next 10 years using fiscal year 2022 spending baseline for 10 years, only a 1% nominal increase every year? I mean, it sounds like a good concept, but for 10 years? And the other issue I want to ask you about is raising the debt ceiling only until next March. Do you really want to go through this whole process again next March during an election year, or are those two ideas negotiating chips on your part?
Its ability to negotiate. If the president wants to sit at a table and find a way that we can take the debt ceiling further and make other savings, I'm open to that. This isn't predetermined what has to happen, but right now the Republicans are the only responsible ones who are looking at the future of what the debt ceiling, looking at our fiscal house, and getting that in order. In 2011, we had a spending cap put in, and it saved us trillions of dollars. Do you know, when Republicans were in power for those 8 years, do you know how much discretionary spending went up? Not $1. We went down $10 billion, and we grew. You know what happens here is we have more money coming in to government than at any time in history. 20% of our GDP, when the 50-year average is 17. Our problem is when the Democrats took over, they increased spending and brought us inflation. They are spending at more than 23% of GDP, and the 50-year average is 21. He's taking us to 25. That is a sign that we saw in Venezuela, and he's leading the same way.
So they're going to have the vote on this Republican plan to raise the debt ceiling and cut a lot of things this week, including cuts to the military budget, stricter SNAP work requirements, cuts to the TANF budget as well. When they actually go to vote for it, and we get a lot more outline to it, I will keep you up to date here on this channel. If you want to see the video I did with more details on when they came out with that budget, I'll link you to that video here right now. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe down below. Click the subscribe button, then the bell icon so you don't miss out on new videos that come out here on our YouTube channel. It's completely free to do so. And thank you so much for liking and sharing these videos. Here's the video with when the Republicans announced this bill, and a lot more details of that in this video here. Or you can click here if you're a gun owner in America, and a massive problem unveiling with that here right now. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.